Hi, I'm Doug White, and it's episode 205 of the Security Weekly News. Welcome to the week of 17 April 2022. We got Windows 11, iPhone zero-click, LinkedIn, scraping made simple, ransomware gangs are not nice, Webex microphones are always listening to you, and Jason Wood on this edition of the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. Monitoring and maintaining compliance is a never-ending struggle with a high price of failure. Firemon helps customers meet complex and varying compliance requirements. Firemon has fully customizable reporting, analytics, assessments, and dashboards to meet the compliance needs of any organization. With Firemon, compliance reports take a tenth of the time, and real-time continuous compliance eliminates the anxiety and headaches of audit preparation. Improve security outcomes by improving security operations with Firemon. Visit securityweekly.com/Firemon to learn more. Cybercriminals are working overtime. Last year in the fourth quarter alone, phishing attacks disguised as COVID testing information increased by 521%. Barracuda has identified 13 types of email threats and how cybercriminals use them to steal money from your company or personal information from your employees and customers. Find out about the 13 email threat types and how Barracuda can provide complete email protection for your teams, your customers, and your reputation. Get your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
All right. Well, hackers are continuing to use Windows 11 as a phishing lure to get people to install a fake update. I mean, I guess that's not that big of a new thing, but it apparently is still going strong. This latest one, it's a fake update. It contains malware that steals your browser. It basically steals everything. It steals your browser data, your crypto wallet, anything else you have locally. So if you got it on there, it's going to take it. The campaign is using search poisoning to display a fake promotional page for Windows 11 that looks pretty much like the actual Windows 11 page. And unless you really want to examine all these pages, it's going to pass. But the website is the domain is windows11-upgrade11.com, and at least as of this morning, I went to it and it was still up. And so my anti-malware did detect it and said it was a dangerous site that was probably being used for phishing, but I went on through anyway, and yep, it's there, and it looks like that's exactly what it does. So you may get a warning about it if you try to go there. But the page basically, if you click on anything, downloads an ISO file that will be downloaded onto your machine. There is a report from CloudSec in the article that walks through all the dissection of this malware if you're interested in how it works or what it's doing or what different techniques it's using. But it would probably be a good site to put in your block list at about this point, and you might actually want to remind people about when you're reminding them about fake tax sites and fake tax scams and all that kind of stuff, as well as these fake Windows 11 update site. If their home machine gets compromised, well, this thing's going to grab their login credentials, and then they're going to be able to get into your operation, and how that works and what happens then. On that same line, Windows 11 has continued to struggle to be adopted. It just hasn't found that lovable face that it can get somebody to say, that's the one. It has, in fact, yet to surpass the current usage level of Windows XP, which when I was reading this, I was like, what? Lansweeper, anyway, apparently has their agent was scanning. Their agent's called Fing or something like that. But Lansweeper scanned 10 million PCs that have their agent installed, with 20% of them being enterprise machines and 80% being consumer PCs. And they found that Windows 11 was only on about 1.44% of those machines, with Windows 10 having about 80.34%. Now, Windows XP still is out there running on 1.71% of the machines in this scan. I mean, give them hell, guys. You'll take my Windows 95 and you pry it from my cold, dead fingers. I'm not giving it up. Windows 2000 was still in there running on 0.15%. I mean, that's getting out there. But this is the best one. There was even 0.04% running on, say it with me, Vista. That's right. 0.04% of those users were still running good old Vistas. That's about 8,000 machines. The people that are out there every day getting up and turning on that old Vista machine, are pulling the pull starter on their Vista machine that's running on, like LP gas, and dialing up good old America Online and chatting with their friends. Yeah, I was surprised there weren't like Windows 95, Windows 3.1. There probably are people that are still out there, but they probably can't actually run this tool that was being used in the survey, so they probably didn't pick those up. I know right now where a Windows 3.1 machine is that's sitting on the floor of someone's home that still works, or at least it worked last year. I mean, that person's not around anymore, but I think the house is still sitting there, so that computer's probably still sitting there, and we could go turn it on and use Windows 3.1 if we really felt like it. I mean, I guess there's just not really a compelling reason to adopt Windows 11. I mean, moving the start button from this side to off the screen or to the right side of the screen or whatever, and changing the default background, to me, it's just not that big of an incentive to try and upgrade everything to something new that's, who knows how many problems it's going to have. And most people aren't really comfortable with that anyway, especially people that are using, say, like Windows XP. So, they just use whatever's installed in that machine they bought it, back at Radio Shack in 1998 or something, that they've still got that running on. Enterprise, well, I mean, companies are still running Windows XP because it works, and they don't want to retrain, upgrade hardware, upgrade software, redevelop, recompile, and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's always next year when Microsoft Windows Rampant Stallion Edition will be released. I was using my marketing skills to name it something better than like Windows 12. So I thought like Rampant Stallion, Rampant Stallion, it's a workhorse of an OS for those times when you just got to get her done. Microsoft, send me a check for that, okay? That's like all copyright, Doug White. Thank you very much. Citizens Lab has discovered a zero-click iMessage exploit that can be used to install NSO group spyware. Yeah. They're just sort of slowly starting to dissect what happened with this Pegasus spyware stuff and how it was installed on people's machines and so forth. The flaw, which is now named Homage, apparently affects versions of iOS before 13.2, which is quite a few versions ago. But guess what? Probably just like Windows 95, there's people still running iOS 12 on various things. But that was used to install Pegasus spyware from the NSO group on at least 65 people's phones. And that sounds like a really small number, but these were all people that, like, are headline news on a regular basis, like, say, Boris Johnson. So between 2017 and 2020, they identified in this study 65 high-profile people that had this installed. They also saw the use of Kismet iMessage exploit and WhatsApp flaws to install this malware being used. The targets in this particular study were in particular, there was a whole bunch of people, but they had a whole bunch of Catalonian members of European Parliament, every Catalan president since 2010, and other Catalonian legislators, judges, journalists, and members of civil society organizations, as well as their family members, were getting this stuff installed on their phones. Reuters had already been reporting on this before regarding other officials in Europe who had Pegasus installed on their devices. And if you've forgotten, Pegasus was a widely used, apparently, tool that, despite the claims of the company, they claimed that it was a piece of spyware, yes, and it allows tracking of the device, reading their text, listening to their conversations, password grabbing, accessing the microphones and cameras and so forth, as well as information harvesting tool. But it basically turns your phone into a bug that sniffs everything, and you carry it around with you. So it's like, a spy dream come true. But NSO claimed they only sold this product to governments, law enforcement, and military organizations under what I would call incredibly vague assumption that none of these groups is ever doing anything bad. I mean, authoritarian dystopia? Well, you're a good authoritarian dystopia, right? Great, thank you, Mr. Vader. That will be 150,000 galactic credits. And the location of delivery? Alderaan, oh, that's a pretty nice place, I hear. Always wanted to go, but the missus had to visit the family on the moons of Meepsor. Maybe next year. What's that, Mr. Vader? Don't put down a deposit on anything? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more. Got it. Okay. The most spoofed brand for phishing. The most spoofed brand for phishing is now LinkedIn. I mean, the professional social media site accounted for more than 52% of all phishing attacks, according to this Checkpoint study, and they were reporting a dramatic uptick as well in LinkedIn abuse in the first quarter of this year. I mean, it makes sense to me. It's like a person in a nice coat and tie approaches you on the street and asks for something is a lot less likely to get tear gassed than somebody who's wearing a garbage bag and a tinfoil hat, right? And I have been approached by both those people before on the street asking for things. Although I will say the garbage bag person with the tinfoil and everything was a lot more interesting conversation. But apparently I'm possessed by demons. But regardless of all that, a lot of people do sort of trust LinkedIn because it's a professional site that's supposedly filled with professionals doing professional things. And so, of course, they use this as a phishing attack. The second most mimicked brand is DHL, followed by Google, Microsoft, and FedEx, and then there's some others. But the drop-off between LinkedIn's 52% and DHL is really, really steep. I mean, like DHL, didn't even, I don't think they had even 10%. It was really LinkedIn. So in the example they provided, a phishing email in the inbox had LinkedIn logos and style and had an offer to connect with this made-up firm and, offering to hire you or whatever. And when you click accept, of course, it basically dumps you onto a login site for fake LinkedIn that is on, this one was on carriermasr.com domain. And I mean, social media phishing is like trolling, right? It's just like it's really, really easy to do. It doesn't take a lot of training, and almost anybody can do it. But you might want to put out some more warnings to your people to remember that just because it looks like a friendly contact or a big opportunity, be sure you keep up diligence because that's exactly how they're going to come at you. And speaking of LinkedIn, a court case in the U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on Monday in a fairly older case that scraping data, and this is yet another one of these, scraping data from public websites does not violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And this is a big deal. So this case was another examination of a different case that was called HiQ versus LinkedIn way back in 2017. I think it's pronounced I don't know if it's pronounced Hick or HiQ. HiQ sounds better, so we'll call it that. But basically, what was established in this lower court ruling and the appellate court back in 2017 and 2019, they decided that scraping was not accessing a protected computer without authorization. So even if the company that was putting this information up was asking them not to scrape it, that because it was out there in public, it was scrapable. So in the original case, LinkedIn got sued by HiQ, which is some kind of an employment analytics firm, whatever that means. And HiQ claimed that LinkedIn had been trying to block HiQ from copying public profile data off of LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn was basically trying to keep this from happening. And although the cynic in me says it's just kind of like, they're not paying us for this data, so they can't have it. Maybe not. I don't know. Maybe LinkedIn doesn't do stuff like that. I don't know. But that was my cynical view of it, was like, well, they're just mad because they're not getting any money. But anyway, the judge said that the CFAA did not apply unless someone exceeded authorized access, whatever that means, because even the Supreme Court's having trouble figuring out what that means exactly. But it basically, what they're saying now is that public data can be scraped. LinkedIn's big argument was that they put in technical barriers to web scraping and they sent cease and desist orders to this company, and that should be an authorization mechanism and so forth, and it shouldn't be allowed. But basically the court said, nope, it's not. So basically, if you don't want data scraped and it's freely available, it will have to be put behind a paywall or some other actual authorization mechanism, so somebody has to actually log in. They can't get to it directly, and otherwise you can't stop them from scraping it. In fact, LinkedIn now has an order against them to allow scraping because they said you can't put up technological barriers to this particular company scraping data off your site unless you want to put it behind a paywall or some kind of authorization wall. And if they do that, well, then it can't be indexed. And so then there's, other whole set of issues with that about how they make money. So, check your profile and decide what you want scraped and what you don't want scraped, because the scrapers are coming to do some scraping, let me tell you. LinkedIn said they will keep fighting this in court, for now anyway. But at this point, public information can be scraped at will in the United States. So just be warned. A report from Trend Micro and the Ponemon Institute said that more than 75% of those corporate users surveyed expected to suffer from a cyber attack in the next 12 months. 25% of those said they felt it was very likely. Love that confidence, but I don't know how they define cyber attack either. More than 80% of the respondents said their organizations were hit with one or more successful cyber attacks in the last 12 months, and 35% of these organizations said they had suffered 7 or more attacks. The report was from the second half of 2021. There weren't a lot of details I could dig out of there about the study without putting a bunch of information in. And the respondents, I don't know who they were. I don't know what they were asked, but it did sound pretty grim, like, okay, well, it's not really that surprising. If you're saying, we all get attacked pretty regularly, but do the attacks succeed? So I wondered if they ask about how likely you thought there would be an attack or how likely you thought an attack would succeed. And I was kind of interested in that. And would it result in a loss, or is it just somebody probing, or what? I guess they mean damage and loss, because you probably get attacked about every 12 seconds. So unless you're incredibly stealthy, and then it's probably about every 15 seconds or so. So I guess it depends on what they call an attack. So anyway, here's one. Ransomware group lies about their intentions. Shocking new film at 11. This story on Krebs, it's a good story, though. Don't get me wrong. The story on Krebs was basically talking about Conti ransomware gang and how they had pledged to lay off healthcare providers. And I'm like, right, that's kind of like that old televangelist saying, if I don't get $1 million by tomorrow, brothers and sisters, well, Jesus is just going to come down and stab me 100 times in the eyes. So get out those checkbooks and keep old Dale preaching. I'm like, it's a ransomware gang. What did you expect them to say? Just keep saying, no, we're good guys. We're trying to do this for the good of all humankind. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, Conti did say that they would stop. But hopefully all the healthcare security people didn't go, cool, guess we can just turn everything wide open and go get a beer. Conti says they won't bother us. But this article does report that Conti launched more than 200 attacks against hospitals and healthcare facilities since they first got up and running back in 2018 when were called RIAC. Of course, they just said they would refrain, right? So maybe that means they only attacked 1 per day instead of 10 per day. Errol Weiss was a person reporting some of this, and Errol Weiss said that ransomware attacks using Conti and RIAC have impacted hundreds of facilities in the U.S. in 192 different cities and 41 different states, as well as the District of Columbia. Once you sort of put on that ransomware outfit and become a ransomwearer, well, you pretty much are willing to target anyone, right? And that's just how it works. And you always put out statements saying, we're the good guys. We're like puppies. We love long walks on the beach. You'll like us, really. And we really will try to lay off your grandmother and those healthcare sites. We will, really. Starting tomorrow. Just starting tomorrow. But, as long as there's one more person running Windows NT 4.0, could you please just stand up and let us know that you're there? Because we won't attack you. We won't, I promise. Anyway, he spent 10 years in the Congo Basin studying the bonobo chimps, trying to teach them to play music. And after spending all this time, he found that invariably, no matter what, almost every animal species seems to immediately learn how to play Smoke on the Water. His new book on the matter is called Smoke, Water, and Electric Guitar Among Bonobo Chimps, The Coming Storm. It's out this week. Please welcome Jason Wood.
Hey, everybody. Good to be back with you after I was out last week. This gets to be a little bit of an improv version because my laptop with my notes and everything like that decided to die 2 minutes before we went on air. So this article actually that I found was on Gizmodo, and it starts off, NATO plays cyber war to prep for real Russian attack. And I was like, okay, what the heck is this? What are they talking about? Well, it turns out that this prep for or cyber war preparation that they're doing is an annual exercise that's been going on for 12 years. So great headline. I'm sure they're incorporating things that are going on or that they speculated would happen in the Ukraine. But really, this is something that's been happening since 2010, I believe it was. And so the article, though, still caught my attention. I just thought it was interesting to look at this type of preparation that countries are doing. And as it turns out, basically starting today, that's the 19th through the 21st or so, 30 NATO countries are participating in what is called an exercise called Locked Shields. It's been going on for a while. It's run by and I have to look it up, Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence, or CCDCOE, as I'm going to call it the rest of this time, because that's less to say, though a little bit of a tongue twister in its own right. The idea behind this exercise is we have a bunch of blue teams who are defending the fictional country of Beria, something like that. It's an island country, and they're defending them from some kind of ongoing attack that is targeted and going after everything in this country. They've got regular IT systems, they've got military systems, government, power and critical infrastructure systems that they're dealing with in here. And so I kind of dug into this a little bit further, because I'm always a little skeptical about when you hear about some of these exercises, how much of this is game to make everybody look good, how much of this is legitimate and is actually going to do something. And so I did some more reading on the exercise, because I thought, I actually just came out of some training, so here's another training process. Now, it turns out CCDCOE was initially started by basically Estonia took the initiative on this. They brought it up shortly after joining NATO, and then in 2007 they suffered a series of attacks themselves that got them and 6 other countries to go ahead and create the CCDCOE. Which I believe was like Germany, Latvia, Slavic Republic, Spain, Italy. I think there was another one in there. They got together to push this idea. It's based out of Estonia itself. That's actually where this year's exercise is taking place, which everybody makes note of in the news article that, oh my goodness, this is taking place just a few hundred miles away from an actual war. Which may or may not have anything to do with anything, but they like to talk about that a bit. And as they talked about what the makeup of this exercise was like, I was kind of impressed. Basically, the 2021 exercise, these teams were tasked with defending about 5,000 systems. And if you look at some of the pictures in here, they've got, it looks like Raspberry Pis and virtualized systems. They've got different PLCs and other devices associated with, it looks like, that I recognize from ICS type of environments. And, so that was kind of interesting. I'm like, okay, 5,000 hosts is a lot to try and deal with and coordinate. In the midst of this, they've got 40 different they've got a number of different red teams coming after them and actively attacking them. So these guys and gals are not getting much sleep during the next few days. They are basically in crisis mode trying to respond to this. The CCDCOE website, talking about the exercise, made the comment that one of the areas that they have found to be most challenging for the blue teamers are the following areas: protecting unfamiliar but specialized systems, which, that would be a treat. Writing good situation reports while you're under serious time pressure. Anybody who's been through an incident has had, executives or management coming in and asking for updates and, what can we put out on this? And you're trying to write something up. In this case, it's more formalized because it's, government and military type of stuff. So they have to write briefings. So that would be very difficult. This one's kind of obvious. Detecting and mitigating attacks in large complex IT environments. Yeah, that's always hard, even if you're not under fire. So definitely something I did not, that was expected to see. And then well-coordinated teamwork. Now, that's kind of the point of these exercises, if you're doing this well, is to learn how to deal with this. And so this sounds like, really pretty good under the fire type of exercise to train folks up and get them used to it. And I imagine every year they're getting new folks coming in who, as folks get military members get assigned off of current taskings over to something else, and new people get assigned to this. So they've got a batch of people that this is the first time they've dealt with this every time they run this exercise. So one of the things that stood out to me about this was actually due to a conversation I had with somebody last week. I talked to a gentleman as I was traveling who owned a managed service provider, and his company basically fell to a ransomware attack through the system that they use to manage all of their customers. This was not the July attack last year with Kaseya. This actually happened a few years earlier. Basically, though, the attackers got into this environment. There was a vulnerability it was Kaseya, actually, and they prepped everything and then ransomed all of this company's customers all at one time. And now they had done all of their preparation. They had talked about this. They had tested backups to make sure that they could do things, that they were working, that they could recover systems and stuff like that. What they hadn't done was prepared for it under fire. And I think that's where a lot of us, a lot of companies are at. We do things that are drills and stuff like that, but we're not really doing this under fire. And in this case, he got to experience that. And, like with the backup system I mentioned, they had good backups. Everything's great until they turned around and they went to their service provider that handled all of the online backups and said, okay, here are the 300 systems we need to recover, and we need to even get them back right now. And their service provider said, maybe we can do 12 today. And basically, they weren't capable of responding on that scale. So, it was essentially, here's what the agreements were, here's what the paperwork says, but when it comes down to making it happen, things don't work out the way that you expect. And then you have all the pressure that's associated with it. He was telling me how he gets called in by incident response teams to talk to, or gets referred out rather to the owners of companies or senior management for them to call him up, to him kind of talk them off the ledge as he's explained to him, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is how this is going to feel. Remember, you have to do things like eat. You have to take a shower once in a while. You have to get some sleep, basic stuff that people overlook when you're in the middle of a crisis. So I think this is interesting. This is a good exercise. This is a good, example here of something that maybe we could emulate on a smaller scale. It's really hard to stand up 5,000 systems just to test something, right? Something that's appropriate, though, for your organization to test out and make sure you're prepared, because you may think everything's lined up. And this company thought they had all of their preparations and whatnot. What they weren't ready to do was do it at scale and under the pressure cooker. So here's a good example of this. So go check the show notes, take a read at this. Is this something you could emulate? Is there a place that you could go maybe to contract out to build an environment to allow you to emulate something like this? Run a drill with your backup provider and say, hey, we need to install, restore 30 systems right now, go. Put them under the pressure a little bit, see how that works. Add that element of crisis to our drills rather than just, okay, we're going to go out here, we're going to restore a few things, and cool, it worked. Okay, what are we doing for lunch? So go take a read at it. I found it rather impressive. The pictures were kind of fancy of the environment. And it was just kind of thought-provoking as I kind of turned around and applied that, to this experience I had talking with this owner of an MSP and my own background in IT. So with that, Doug, back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, I almost did that story because I was very interested in that environment building stuff. So thank you.
Yeah, it was kind of wild looking.
Yeah. I did read that story, and I was like, I'll do that story, but then I had some others. So yeah, cool. Thanks. And finally, in case you didn't know it, your camera and your microphone are probably always listening. In this particular report, researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and Loyola reported that video conferencing applications can actively query the microphone even if you have it muted. They found that some of the applications are continuously monitoring the microphone input even when it's muted, and they're tracking that for telemetry data that is transmitted back to the servers to try to identify the types of background activities that the users are performing. What? Apparently, they have a proof of concept that will identify 6 different common types of background activities based on the telemetry from video conferencing apps while the user was muted. They looked at BlueJeans, Cisco Webex, Discord, Google Meet, GoToMeeting, Jitsi Meet, Teams, Skype, Slack, Whereby, and Zoom, and found that all of them were capable of doing this, even if you have muted the mic in the app. The researchers then went on and found that Webex was the only project which was continuously sampling the microphone while the user was muted. Apparently, you can contact Cisco, I don't know how, it didn't say, and ask them to disable this data collection. Yeah, right. And, I have a power mute on mine, so they can listen all they want to, but it's not going to get around that. I mean, it's kind of like the Post-it note on the camera. You can monitor it, but you're not going to get anything. Although I may, now that I know that, start playing my K-Tel classics of mating sounds of cephalopods at very low volume into the microphone. Just, put it on a separate channel, just so they can kind of hear some odd things going on in the background, and maybe decide that, like, I'm in some kind of whale brothel or something, which would be a pretty interesting place to go. But anyway, might give them something to wonder about. And that's the news. Thanks, Jason. I'm hosting Paul's Security Weekly tomorrow night, so check that out. Otherwise, I'll see you Friday on the wrap-up show.